Hey, everybody. Before we jump into this week's podcast, I'm so excited to tell you about the Integrated Leader Mastermind. Trey Tucker and I are starting a 6-month mastermind for Christian executive guys who want to do more. They want to be more. They want to not walk alone. There's a link in the comments below, and we would love to take your application to see if you might be the right fit. We're only taking 12, so apply today. Welcome back to the Follow to Lead podcast, a Christian leaders podcast powered by EB Solutions, energy benefits for every business. Go to ebsolutions.com today and learn how you can save real money on tax savings through an energy audit. Again, go to ebsolutions.com and tell them Tony sent you. Friends, today on the podcast, you're going to love meeting Dr. Stephen Graves. Steve Graves has been a coach for over 30 years. He's written multiple books, and he's written a newsletter every week for many, many years. We talk about what it means to age well. We talk about what it means to listen to God's calling and how to be consistent in your life. So many good nuggets here. I know you're going to love Steve. He's a voice that I think we all kind of will resonate with. So now, here's a quick word from our partners and my conversation with Steve Graves. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited today to introduce you to Steve Graves. Now, Steve is here because Eric Geiger, who was on the podcast just a couple episodes ago, said that Steve was the greatest leader he met in the flesh. Steve, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Wow. Thanks. Love to be here. Honor to be here. And I'm just still trying to think about, of all the people Eric's ever met, he must have had just a quick brain freeze or something when you asked the question on that one.
Well, I will say this. It's not very often that someone walks with you for 7 years like you did with Eric. And so I think one of the things that makes leaders great, and I think this is probably true for you, is consistency over time. Yeah. And so it's obvious that you made a deep impact on his life.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was honored to be able to journey with him a little bit, but thanks to be here. Love the chance to meet new friends and talk about things we love.
You know, one of the things we're doing this year that we talked about a little bit before I hit record is we're wrestling with some of the most Googled leadership questions that leaders have. And this month is all about being overwhelmed or burnt out. So let me ask you this, Steve. Let's say that you're sitting across from a middle executive, someone who's leading, who's got people above them or people below them, or she has got a team of people that she's leading. And let's say that they come to you and they say, Steve, I feel so burnt on the edges of my life. What are some of the things that you recommend to help dealing with that overwhelmness or the burnt out feeling?
Yeah, a great question. Well, like so many questions like that, I'm really not a one size fits all, one pill makes it all happen as a general rule. There are some best practices, I think, that do fit more people than not, that are repeatable practices or habits or mindsets or things like that are reoccurring. Like, it'll help a lot of people, but generally speaking, problems like that, I usually go at them a couple of ways. I'll say that there's some surface things and there's some root things. Surface things would be, if, just ask yourself, are you trying to do too many things? One of the things that we believe in our coaching practice, I've been coaching CEOs, business owners and entrepreneurs, family offices, founders, all that for almost 4 decades now. And, one of the things that we installed early on in our thinking is something called the composite scorecard of life. And, the composite scorecard of life is the reality that most people by design, we have multiple hats. We have a bunch of stuff that we're supposed to, like, we don't have one priority and then number two, then number three. We got a whole bunch of number ones. Like, the big best, like if you have got 4 kids, you don't have one kid that you like the best and the second one. I mean, like any given day, one kid might want more priority or need more priority, whatever. And so you got a bunch of number ones. It just depends on the day and the minute of which number one really needs your best help. And so the composite scorecard idea is the notion that at the end of the day, most leaders, most people have got a number of priorities competing and pressuring and putting tension on each other to say, give me some of your focus, give me some of your time, give me some of your energy, give me some of your resources. And our ability to dance and juggle and balance that is critical. Knowing the difference between a God-given assignment and then just an opportunity, a flashy thing that might be coming across your screen, and being able to detect the difference in that and then be able to chase which one's the right thing is enormous. And so all of a sudden I shifted from just the surface up here, to tie it back, of, maybe you got too many things that you're chasing, to a rooted deal is, are you trying to be like an A+ performer in everything in life? Like, in the neighborhood I live in, there are people who exercise more than me. There are people who eat better than me. There are people who are better husbands than me. There are people who take care of their yards better than me. There are people who are better dads than me. There are people, just pick it, And so, but you know what? I don't want to be a D or an F at A in one thing and fail at everything. I'm trying to be a B+, maybe an A- across the course of life, in all the things that are pushed in front of me. So the question of tension and capacity and margin time and pressure and all that, a lot of that comes down to what's the model in my brain? What's the box that I'm chasing, that I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing? Real quick story, then I'll put this one on you. I remember years ago, I had a business partner who was a young guy. We each owned 50% of this business, and he wanted to become a marathoner. And so he started doing marathons training. Then he started doing marathons, every month, every couple of weeks, whatever. And finally one day I sat down with him. I said, "Hey man, do you have any idea how much time you're spending on this whole marathon pursuit and journey that you're chasing?" He said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, let me just ask you this." I said, "Are all the other guys that you're joining for this stuff every week, are they married?" "Well, no." I said, "Now, aren't you married?" I knew he was married. "Weren't you married?" "Oh, yeah. Yeah. Don't you have kids?" "Oh, yeah. Got a couple, 2 or 3 young kids." I said, "Great, great." And I said, let me ask this. Do any of them have jobs?" He said, "Well, not really. Most of them kind of are living, parents taking care of them, or their dads are working in the dad's business, but they don't have to show up." I said, "Now, aren't you trying to build a business? Like, don't you and I co-own a business we're trying to grow?" I said, "Look, man, you can't do it all. You can't. And the faster you realize what is important to you and what are you pursuing, and then design your world against that, and then try to chase the composite scorecard, that's the world that will yield you probably the flourishing life that you want." So, long-winded answer, but a lot of it's not just, it's not just get up earlier. It's not just, start at the bottom and cut the thing you don't like, because you can do all those little surface tricks. But at the end of the day, we all have a big plate of assignments to juggle all day, every day, and that's life.
One of the interesting things that you mentioned is about the composite scorecard. I think scorecards are great tools to help us identify and get a clear picture of who we are. In some ways, they're like a mirror that we can put up in front of us, and they just show us the ugly truth and remove the filters, or the beautiful truth, for it doesn't always have to be ugly. Here's the thing that I often wrestle with when I talk to leaders is, how do I know when it's time to do a check-in and say, man, I probably need a scorecard in my life?
Yeah, yeah. Great question again. Another frame that we use a lot is, most leaders, if you're the owner or you're the founder, or even if you're an executive, you don't have to be the owner, but it's a noisy, lonely, heavy world out there. I mean, the world of being a founder or an owner or an executive, in today's world, it's heavy, it's lonely, and it's noisy. and knowing how to sort through the voices flying around your head all the time, and so from my world, if you feel like that you need a little bit more clarity or a little bit more confidence or a little bit more certainty, or you need to find your footing, or you need somebody to help you with sequencing or whatever, it's probably time to find a voice outside your own voice in your own head. And that's kind of hard for some generations. I just turned 70 last December, and I did not grow up in a generation where we were always raising our hands saying, "Will somebody please come help me figure out my world?" I grew up without a dad in my home, so I grew up fiercely independent. And uh, I again, same model, just didn't grow up with saying, love to have somebody else come help me think about something, much less figure out something. But there comes a time when every leader hits a stretch or a season in their journey that they might not be as certain as they usually are. They're not as clear as they usually are. The noise, the heaviness, the lonely is more exaggerated, and they could use somebody stepping into their world and saying, "Hey," and you know what? I mean, I'm a premium CEO coach and have been for a long time, but it doesn't have to be a paid thing. It could be somebody that you have a close enough relationship with. And the two rules for me on that one, Tony, are: is there trust already built between you and them and you and them and you? And then do they have context? And then do they have any subject matter expertise to talk about it? If you don't have trust and you don't have any context and no subject matter expertise, you can still air your issues, but you might not be able to really get any help. But if I find somebody I have trust and they have some and they understand my context, and they have a little bit of background or expertise in the area, man, I need to be all ears. I need to be wide open saying, what do you have to say to that about, so maybe give me a scorecard, help me rank out some stuff, force rank some things.
Yeah, one of the things we talk a lot about on the podcast is the counsel of the godly. Who are the men and women in your life who are sitting around the table that have the authority to speak into your life? And are you checking with them in terms of what we would call like the godly decision-making process? And that idea, it's really played out beautifully in your life. One of the things that I noticed when I was doing research, and you confirmed it when we started talking earlier, was that you're kind of built for partnership. And some 30 odd years ago, you partnered with a guy named Tom to start Cornerstone, and it was kind of an unexpected partnership. I think that there are a lot of leaders listening who want more partners in their life. So my question specifically is about: how did you know the difference between a friend and a partner,
Yeah.
and when it was time to say, okay, God, you've clearly brought this person in my life for a purpose and not just a season? How
Yeah.
did you wrestle on that tension?
Yeah. Well, there's a whole bunch of great question again. You're good at asking questions, but, the, you know, the conversation of partnership is, you gotta ask, what is it you're trying to find mutual the core thread underneath and through all partnerships that I have had and I have seen being successful is the concept of mutuality. And you have to figure out mutuality as it relates to what areas. Like some partnerships, it's just more mutuality in the sense of we love to travel together and socialize together. So it's a social mutuality. It's a social partnership. Well, sometimes you have somebody that says, "No, let's do a business together," or "Let's go in and try to do some work together." So it's work and economic mutuality. So it's not that it's a higher level. It just has new dimensions to it. I like a bunch of partnerships that are. I've got friends that we travel with every year. We go on trips, but I'm not in business with any of these guys. We don't sit down and look at a P&L or look at our risk or a capital call and who has to put more money up. No, we're figuring out what part of the Caribbean we're going to go back to and have another annual fun time in the sun or whatever. And so you got to figure out you got to define what layers to your partnership are you potentially exploring and developing, and then once you have one, you got to begin to kind of work your way through all the normal design questions of partnerships. And I'm a partner guy. Some people by nature are not. They're really more sole proprietors, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, it's amazing. A lot of pastors, a lot of athletes, a lot of performers, a lot of artists, they're sole performers at their core. They're designed that way. And the only way they know how to partner is for other people to help them get their concert bigger. Help them on the stage. The whole deal is I'm in the center of the stage. I'm the performer. And again, don't think moral. It's not a moral. It can be, but it's more like it's a structural design model. Take an architect. An architect is somebody who sits down and they drive skill sets through their talents, and so it might be hard for a sole proprietor to partner together. Now, I'm not saying you can't ever do it, but if you're wired for partnerships, some people just think this. Some people are really more wired to do the solo sports. I'm going to go play golf. I'm going to play tennis. I mean, a golfer can win and go to the national competition and the team's still back at home watching it on TV, but not in basketball. I mean, you can't be, we had a serious 5-star talent, top 5 draft, on our basketball team last year. But guess what? When we lost, the team lost. He went home with the rest of the team. He didn't keep going in his individual deal. If you're a sole proprietor, no problem with that. If you're a partner, learn the game of partnerships. Now, again, one last quick thing. I'm not excusing sole proprietors from learning how to relate and play well with others. That is not that you got to learn that. But partnerships it's a whole nother deal. And I'm just a partner guy. I've had dozens and dozens, have them right now, dozens of partnerships. Love them. Love partnerships. They're not all easy. They can go sideways. For some people, it's a lot more dragged. But I'm a really, really big believer. If you structure and design for 2 + 2 = 5 or 2 + 2 = 7, if you design for synergy, you can get it. You really can. And I've been the benefactor of that to have a long time.
One of the things that's interesting about that is I think a lot of leaders, again, going back to that scorecard idea, they're not sure of how they're wired. Do you have any suggestions on saying, okay, if these are some indicators that you might be more of a sole proprietor versus some indicators that you might be more wired for partnership?
Yeah. I do, but nothing's ever been formalized. I'm usually I'm winging it on a piece of paper or at my whiteboard with somebody. But here's the deal. I promise you could hit Claude or Chat GPT and ask that very question, and there would be a quick bullet point contrast laid out like within seconds. But a lot of it's just, if you just instinctively think about it, like what sole proprietors usually they get uncomfortable delegating. Because guess what? Nobody can sing it like I can sing it. Nobody can play the drums like just whatever. And so delegation's a lot harder for sole proprietors as a general rule. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't, again, find people to help support the hub and spoke. The hub and spoke model, which most leaders have heard about, usually it works best for sole proprietors until it doesn't. It works great until all of a sudden the wheel and the hub and the spokes are so big that you can't do it all anymore. And guess what? It starts breaking down, and you need a different kind of leader leading a different, more empowered team. And so I don't have a quick filter or a quick test model on that, but I do know this. I'm absolutely certain that when God designed us, at our core, part of our core, I have a thing called, it's voice center path toolbox. And we use it for a lot of our entrepreneurs in figuring out what they're great at, what they're not good at in this very question. And so I am convinced that when God designed us, there's a general leaning of the kind of organizational structure we operate in best. Let me tell you, you can look at people all day long working somewhere and just say, wow, man, you really are a great collaborator team. You're a good team sport person. Or the converse is like, yeah, you probably ought to really just do your own thing. You just need to hang out your own shingle because everybody, every time you try to do Tony and Steve and Tony, it just doesn't work because Steve needs to do his own thing or whatever. I'm just using that as an example.
Oh, yeah, I think one of the interesting things is I think we all have to wrestle with the question, the best version of me looks like X,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and
Right.
so like one of the things I know about myself is the best version of Tony is when I am talking it out with a human
Yeah.
who I trust, whose voice I have a director of operations. She's part-time and she's an independent contractor with me. And she just keeps me from going off the rails, right? Like her job is to be like, focus and gets me. But here's the thing. The best ideas come when I'm just processing because I'm a verbal processor
me
with
too.
her.
Me too.
Right.
Yeah. Me too. Dude, I've got you in spades on that. I mean, I 100% agree because that's where I literally, right before we started, I had a chat with Celeste, my executive assistant that's been with me. She and I worked together forever. I mean, decades. And so, and we spent probably 10 to 12 minutes talking about something on one of my latest books. And literally that 12 minutes was more enlightening than I could have sat at my desk with my computer for 3 days. 'Cause I'm a verbal processor, and that's where I unlock a lot of my thinking because it's collaborative interaction that does it.
Now I have found that I can cheat a little bit with AI. So I started using voice notes.ai
Yeah.
and then I'll be in the car and I know that people driving by are like, man, that guy's got to be on the phone when in reality I'm just talking to myself. I'm just talking it out loud because I'm so crazy about verbal processing.
That's awesome. That is awesome. That's too fun. I'm going to start looking for people like you on the road.
One of the things that's interesting talking about writing and creating is you've been putting out content into the world for decades. And so you've got a newsletter that goes out every week. It's got over 14,000 subscribers on your email list. And I think one of the things that most leaders struggle with is consistency over time. And I kind of teased that a little bit at the beginning of the episode when I talked about your relationship with Eric. One of the questions that I'm always trying to get underneath is, how did you know what to be consistent with? Like, oh, you're like writing. I've now been writing for decades. How did you know that this is one of those things that will make me a better leader? And what are some of the other things in your life that you're like, consistency is the key to this?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, Tony. I don't have some magic box or pill. I'm like every other person. I try to I try to make sure that I'm staying as far away from the ditches on each side of the path every day as I can. I do not stay in the saddle every day, unlike some hero leaders. I get bucked off. I fall off. I dismount. I mean, all the images you can use. And then when I fail, when I mess up, instead of just, staying down, I try to jump back up on the saddle. And I don't, Tim Keller said years ago, I had the chance to work with their organization and get to know him some. And so I remember he was saying in the deal that we all are, at the end of the day, we're a composite of kind of our DNA, where we have grown up, who helped raise us, and the choices we make. And you put all those four things together, and like, I don't care who you are, that's who you are. You are those four things stirred up together, and then there's your life. And so I can't help my DNA. I really can't help where I grew up. And for the most part, none of us can help how we were raised in our earlier years. And so the only thing we really can determine is the choices we make. So, I try to make good choices, and I don't make them all the time. The people around me, you mentioned your circle of friends, I try to have people that will really call me out and give me some hard news when I need it, relative to my life and my choices and stuff. I wrote a book years ago called Flourishing. And the premise of the whole book of Flourishing is that sound thinking with right thinking with wise living over time yields the life that most of us really are yearning for. And so, and when I start having wrong thinking or unwise living against any time frame, usually I'm gonna I'm gonna have a black eye or a bruised knee or blood somewhere. And so to the degree that I can stay in the box of right thinking, and I know that that's very subjective and a lot of conversation has to be had about that, but right thinking, and then that has to translate into my living, wise living. And then that has to be played over time. It can't be just one of those, I'm going to do this for 2 weeks. And, I had a heart attack now 10 years ago, got one stent put in. And, to this day, I'm still trying to make sure I eat a little bit better than I would like to eat, that I actually drag my old lazy bones upstairs or outside and hit my bike. And, because that's wise living for me. It's wrong thinking for me to say, who cares how I eat and my exercise, if in fact I want to have a life that I'm here for my 7 grandkids, having fun with them.
And one of the things we say around here a lot is that if you aren't dedicated to your disciplines, you'll be destroyed by your distractions.
Oh, great. Great. Love it. Love that statement. Really good, solid statement. Yeah. Completely agree with that, and there's, part of it, another book I wrote years ago is called Managing Me. And in that book, most of my books are simply insights that I come out from the streets years after the fact. I write from the street back, not from the classroom or the pulpit out. I'm a guy that spends, like, I socialize something for years and years.
Same, yeah.
And so I wrote a book called Managing Me, and the insight that drove me on that one is, at the end of the day, it's to your statement. It's literally your statement. I have a responsibility to manage my life, period. I can't outsource it. I can't expect you to do it. I can bring some people around me at the end of the day, but it's up to me to manage me. That's it. And if I will own that, then doesn't mean I'm not gonna fail, but at least I'm have a better chance than if I think it's somebody else's job to make sure that I'm doing the right thing and I'm, thinking the right stuff and all that.
I love that you talked about writing from the street back. It dovetails nicely into your latest writing, which is all about the sunset season and this book. And so it's about aging well. And I think it's rooted in one statement that is counterintuitive to the lie that we hear in the world today. And that statement is aging isn't a problem to be solved. Aging isn't a problem to be solved. Can you tell us the story about when you came to that realization in your own life?
Yeah. Yeah. It was, the book came out of probably 4 years ago now. I read a statement one Saturday morning. I read 2 or 3 weekly readers from friends of mine. Max Anderson has one, Kyle Westaway has one, and they compile stuff every week that they read and think is worth reading. And, so I was reading one of their readers, and I remember one of them, I can't remember which one, had a statement in there that said, as we age, we become an exaggerated version of our negative selves. As we age, we become an exaggerated version of our negative selves. So if you're impatient, as you age, you're going to become hyper impatient. If you're fear based, you're going to become hyper fear based. And so instead of us becoming a better version, we become a more exaggerated version of our negative selves. And I was like, dang, is that really true? Does that have to be true? Like, is there like, what about if somebody's a Christian? Like, does the life
Right.
of, does following Jesus not make it, does the gospel not hack that at all? And I was like, man, and I felt like I better start putting everybody on an apology tour and going around like right now, like, I'm really sorry ahead of time for this person I'm going to become. So I spent a couple of years, or actually a little over 2 years, reading everything I could find and listening and praying. Had, I don't know, gazillions of scriptures I worked my way through to where I was really trying to get to the core of the premise of that statement. And through all of that research, it became more than apparent that our modern culture sees aging as a problem that has to be solved. And then that's where I got in juxtaposition the image of the sunset, because I love sunsets and sunrises. And, and you don't try to fix a sunset. You just get up in your chair and enjoy it, or you sit on your boat and enjoy it, or you look out at your balcony, or you just literally walk over to the window, peek out because your spouse says, "Hey, look at the sunset." And you just get a quick glimpse. You're not trying to solve the sunset. You're enjoying the sunset. And aging is a season of life that I don't think, that we're not trying to solve it. We're supposed to enjoy it. And actually, the scriptures are incredibly rich with imagery of in some ways the idea is that I'm supposed to be the best version, the most ripe. Psalm says the most ripe version of me, to use your story, the best version of yourself. Like if you take a piece of fruit, like what day in the life of that fruit, if you take a bite of that peach or apple, is the best taste of that apple? Well, the image would be the sunset season is supposed to be the best, most ripe, flourishing, tasty version of all of my life in some regards. And it's kind of like, wow, now that's a different way to think about the sunset season. Now, it doesn't mean I don't still have aches and I get a hip replacement. I don't take meds. I maybe can't drive like I used to or whatever. Doesn't mean there's not consequences, but the mental image is the best version of myself, not the most exaggerated negative version.
Yeah, one of the things that I found when I was pastoring is that people would often tell me that old people don't like change. And I actually think that that's not true. I think here's what they don't like. They don't like change they can't control.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the challenge is to, as you age, to continue to flex the muscle of change and surrender, which is really just the faith walk that everyone deals with. And so people are always like, old people don't like change. And I was like, that's not true. They're just out of practice.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Good statement. Really good statement, Tony. Love that.
One of the things that's interesting is you're in a season now where you've withdrawn from some of the things that you did do a lot, like a coaching. You're not taking any more executive coaching clients for the most part. And then you're being really strategic with who you pour your time into and what that looks like. And I would imagine a man with your leadership resume, done a lot of things. There's a lot of people who are oftentimes kind of just in your solar system, right? They just kind of hang out in orbit around you. How do you decide who to give your time to in this season of your life?
Yeah, that's a hard one. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Stewardship, and it came out of, we had a magazine decades ago called Life at Work. One of my earliest business partners, Tom Addington, and I launched a magazine called Life at Work, and it was exploring the intersection of business excellence and biblical frameworks of thinking and wisdom. And we did an issue around balance, life balance. And I remember we wrote the lead story, and that's where I first discovered the difference between assignments and opportunities. Assignments are things that God has called me to that have my name on it. I can't say no to them. Opportunities are things that are your assignments that you're trying to make my assignments. It's an opportunity. Hey, Steve, won't you give to this nonprofit? Hey, Steve, won't you join this board? Hey, Steve, won't you join this Bible study? Hey, Steve, won't you take on this client? Hey, Steve, won't you, whatever, and what I've got to do is figure out in all of that, which have my name on it, which do I really do? Introduce the concept of stewardship. The parable of the steward is the master walks down the hill in full imagery. The master walks down the hill, has three stewards, workers, and says, hey, open your bag. Here's some, here's some, here's some. And he puts into our bag the things he expects us to steward. I'm not responsible to steward the whole world. I mean, we all have a world assignment. I get that. I mean, I know I got to help the world be a better place. I got to be careful. But you know what I'm saying? I'm not, Jesus, even Jesus didn't stop with every person who raised their hand that said, hey, Jesus, come over here and talk to me. Now, it sounds a little cruel maybe, but the scriptures seem to indicate he stayed on course with hearing the Father tell him what he should be doing. And
Yeah.
that's how he lived out the yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Now, by no means going to get it straight like Jesus did every day, but our assignment is to look in our bag and say, I'm assigned to do these. So, like every other person in life, I try to set up some wise filters. And I literally just had a conversation with a guy yesterday who had a big request for me. We've been talking about it, and I had to give him the hard answer yesterday that I was not going to participate. And I really prayed hard about it. But you know what? The more I prayed through it, and I thought about all the other things in my composite scorecard that I'm doing, that I'm still taking care of my 95-year-old mom, 7 grandkids on the other end, a bunch of work stuff in the middle. My wife and I love to do certain things together, et cetera, et cetera. I just couldn't add another thing. I just couldn't without taking something else off. And I just had to say no to it. So it's not easy, Tony. That question is not easy for people, especially if you're collaborative, if you have any people pleasing in you, if you are relational at your core. That one is hard for those people. Now, the one that's hard for the other people that are not relational, they're just task oriented, is somebody coming in and giving you another task. Then you saying, hey, Tony, can you get this done for me too? And your answer is, oh, absolutely. Instead of staying up till 11 tonight, you're going to stay up till 12 tonight. And it's like, you can't do it all. You just can't do it all. And so figuring out where you're going to say no to things early in your life and developing a muscle set that allows you, and the grace, the true biblical grace and freedom, that no is an okay answer. It's an okay. Because I can only say yes to my assignments. I don't get a chance to say no to my kids, my grandkids. I'm not saying I can never say no, but I'm saying the notion of being their steward, they're in my box. They're in my bag, man, and I've got to say yes to them. So I don't have to say yes to everything that slides through my radar, even though it might be something that's part of your assignments and you're asking me to make it my assignments. Can't do it all.
Yeah, I think saying no is oftentimes a confirmation of our identity.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Good
this is
statement.
who God's called me to be, so I can't do that right now. I love what you're doing. It's not a judgment statement on that, but I can't because
Yeah.
I'm crystal clear about the season of life that God has me in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Great. No, couldn't agree with that more. I mean, I completely agree with that. Yeah, totally love that statement.
one of my favorite questions to ask seasoned leaders like yourself is it's an advice question. So I want to invite you to go back in time to the very first day where you are working as the founder and CEO of Cornerstone 30 some odd years ago. If you could go back in time and sit with that younger version of yourself, sit knee to knee with them, look him in the eyes, and give him one piece of advice about the journey he's going to go on, what would you tell him?
Um, yeah, man, that's a hard one for me because I have so many things I would tell my early self. I
That's why
mean,
it's one of my favorite
I,
questions. It's very
yeah, I
hard.
mean, I think I would just like, get a big old Diet Coke and get ready for a long talk, young Steve. Not just like, here's one thing. Um, I think probably, uh, I would affirm something. I don't think there's so many things I would say, better be ready for this, better be ready for that. But I would affirm, um, I tried to make having a small handful of friends a big priority. And I would
Mm,
affirm that, and to be frank, Tony, it wasn't because of a lot of times it wasn't because I'm the guy choosing and making it happen. It was other people who helped me, even in my blindness or ignorance,
yeah.
enjoy the benefit of having that for me. And so I might tell myself, hey, don't ever kick against that. Make sure you lean against that, because so much of my development and formation as a man and as a person, as a follower of Christ, as a leader, as a thought leader in some small areas, has been the affiliation with other people. through the journey. And so that when I did find myself getting bucked off the horse, dismounting, making a bad choice to get off and take a break at the wrong time or whatever, the right people were there around me, so I couldn't wander into the ditch on the sides. So that might be one of the early things I would highlight. But again, I got a whole bunch. I'd tell myself to get a giant, the big diet Dr. Pepper or whatever, and get ready.
That's so good. So good. Okay, Steve, I have one more question for you. But before I ask it, I know the bold ones, my tribe here on the podcast, are going to want to find you all over the interwebs. Where can they go to subscribe to your weekly newsletter or to learn more about what God is doing through Cornerstone?
Yeah. There's a couple of websites. We have a Cornerstone Co. Cornerstoneco.com is a site for our coaching practice, but my site for my content is StephenR.Graves.com. And, they can go there and subscribe to the weekly article or the blog or my books. I wrote a book called The 5 Tasks, which is a terrific little tool book for the 5 things every leader's really got to do: set direction, speed, risk, resources, and culture. And it's one of the most useful books I've had through the years. But those 2 websites, people can find us, and love to interface, love to hear from anybody in your world, and appreciate what you guys are doing.
And of course, we'll link to those in the show notes, so you can go down there and just click the link and get connected. All right, sir, the last question that we're asking people this year is to introduce us to the greatest leader they've ever met in the flesh. The person can be living or dead. You just have to interact with them. And we're asking people to avoid the Jesus answer. We know that Jesus is the best leader to ever walk on earth. But who is someone in your life who you've interacted with that you're like, when I think about great leaders, I think about him or her?
Yeah. Well, you talking about the hardest question you could ever ask a guy like me. That's probably the hardest question you could ever ask, because I've had the fun privilege. I have a 3 green light rule I've used for over 3 decades to pick the people I work with, and it's never failed me one time. And so I only work with the hero leaders I really think are incredible. But if you just kept pressing and kept pressing and kept pressing me, I'd give you 2, not 1, because they're caricature exemplars. Probably the most effective, best leader, public facing leader that I know would be Doug McMillon, the former CEO of Walmart, who just stepped down this last year. And, he is a phenomenal leader, just a phenomenal package of leadership. Great guy, solid man. And I mean, I can't say enough about him, but I have long said during his tenure at Walmart, a little over 10 as the CEO, that he was one of the best CEOs in America. And, but he's public facing and everybody knows it. I mean, anybody that knows him, he's an incredible leader. Well, let me give you somebody that you never heard of. I will not give you his last name, but his name is Tim. Okay. And he's from a small city in the South. And he's a guy who just moved from being a pastor to a nonprofit deal. And he's been riding the horse for 35 years. And he is as effective as Doug is, doing what he does in the location he's been assigned to, in the family he has. I don't want to go into his family, but he has some challenges with his family. And the dude, and if I've got this much respect for Doug, I've got that much respect for Tim.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, and if you just made me pick one, I don't know which one I'd pick. I'd just flip a coin. And either one of them deserve for me, because for me, it's not about what you've accomplished. It is what you've accomplished against what your calling was. Doug is very clear. He always felt like this was what God had for him, is working hard and ascending in a corporate setting, public corporate setting. This other guy, same thing. So long-winded answer, as usually most of my answers are, as you've already seen. But I would give you those two people, and I would give you them for a bunch of the same reasons. The same reason I would pick this one is the same reason I would pick this one. Exact same reason.
Amazing. That's good.
Combination of who they are and what they do grew concurrently at the same time, and just on and on.
Steve, this has been such a gift. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for continuing to put great kingdom-minded content out into the world. As a fellow content creator, I'm just super thankful that there are guys like you who are leading and trailblazing before the rest of us. So thank you. And on behalf of our community, what a gift it's been.
Tony, love being here with you. Thanks for inviting me, and the Lord's blessing on you guys, man.
I told you guys, what a fun conversation with Steve. I love his heart. I love the wisdom that comes from a guy like Steve. I think it's one of those things that we all need, someone who's just a little bit further along on the journey. I particularly appreciated the way he talked about aging isn't a problem to be solved. So today's coaching question is really simple, as they often are. Where in your life do you need to surrender a little bit of control, and realize that this isn't a problem to be solved? Where in your life do you need to surrender a little bit of control and realize this isn't a problem to be solved? Well, friends, that's our episode for today. As always, I'm forever thankful for you, the bold ones. Without you, this would not be worth it. If you need anything from me, I'm embarrassingly easy to find. Tony@twmilt.com. And until next time, remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.